Afghanistan. He arrived there a couple of hours ago. There will be other things to talk about, of course, but 285 British servicemen and women have died in Afghanistan, and that puts it at the top of the agenda. What are we doing there, and how long should we stay, and what do the Americans want us to do? I'll put those questions in a moment to General Sir Richard Dannatt, who was Chief of the General Staff until he retired last summer. But let's go first to Afghanistan and our correspondent there, Ian Pannell. And you've been there for, what, 20 months, getting on for 2 years, Ian. What are we doing there?
Well, I think some of the questions that are going to be asked, I think the first questions are going to be about resources, and then the larger questions will be the one that you pose. What are we doing there? What is the strategy? Is it being achieved? And what difference needs to be done to try and achieve a sense of momentum? I think immediately you have clearly very senior figures, including the new Deputy Prime Minister, who've been critical in the past of the resources given to British forces. David Cameron has also been, yes, exactly, and David Cameron has also been critical of the resources that have been given, so they must now, I would have thought, make a fairly rapid assessment of what resources are there, what more needs to be done, and how quickly that can actually be delivered. I think for the troops on the ground, they'll also be looking at the question of money for frontline services. They receive a small amount of money in addition to their regular payment. It is a running sore within the armed services, certainly frontline troops, that it's not enough that their work is not recognised. So I think those are immediate tasks that people would be looking at. But the larger question that you pose about strategy, I think, in essence, the challenge remains the same ever since I've been here, which is how to give widespread momentum to a military campaign that has really reached a stalemate with the Taliban. Now, that doesn't mean that there hasn't been progress in places, for example, like Garmsir and Nadi Ali. There have been significant changes there, but there are others, and Sangin is the obvious area that comes to mind, which is still suffering significant British loss there, where the momentum hasn't changed. I can tell you privately, at least, very senior military figures are talking about the idea possibly that the British would need to hand it over to the Americans, the idea perhaps of a temporary withdrawal and a reinsertion of troops at some later stage. But clearly it is enormously totemic for British forces in terms of the blood and the treasure that has been expended there. And I think those are the key questions. How do you create momentum? What do you do that's different? And I think the US military in particular, General Stanley McChrystal, have rather different views about what the British may need to do in the coming months.
And now we've got Major General Nick Carter, the man who commands the NATO forces in the south, talking about a new offensive to steal the ground, as I think he put it, beneath the Taliban in Kandahar, driving them out of Kandahar.
Yes, and in many ways, what is likely to take place in Kandahar is even more important than the offensives that we saw in Marja and Nadi Ali by British and American forces last year. I mean, Kandahar is, of course, the strategic heartland for the Taliban. It's where the Taliban movement originated. They have hold of a number of districts, and in many others they have widespread influence, and the centre of government in Kandahar itself is riven by corruption, by fighting between different criminal elements as well. In some senses, it's kind of emblematic of everything that has gone wrong in the country, and so they need to turn around the political situation and the military situation. But I don't think anyone's under any illusions that this, I've said it's probably more important. It's also, I think, going to be significantly harder than the previous offensives that we've seen. It'll have to be conducted in a different way. And I think, again, senior military commanders will admit, privately at least, that if they can't get Kandahar right, then that's probably the end of the military plan as we know it. And if you push them on it, they'll tell you, well, there is no plan B. It's then up to the politicians to decide how to proceed. That's quite how important Kandahar is.
Thanks very much for that, Ian. Well, let's put that to General Sir Richard Dannatt immediately. The first point for you, General Dannatt. Do you agree with Ian Pannell on the importance of Kandahar, and if we can't get that right, that's it?
Well, John, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, I completely agree. Kandahar is absolutely critical, and if one analyses all that people have been saying over the last 2 or 3 years, I think we've always recognised that Kandahar was critical. After all, Kandahar is effectively the power base for the Taliban, and the Taliban, if they want to try and control the country, have first of all got to control Kandahar, and then they've opened the access from Kandahar to Kabul.
Now, why should we care very much in this country, given that it's costing us a small fortune and, much more importantly, many, many lives have been lost? Who is in control of Kandahar?
I think that question gets to the whole wider issue of why we're in Afghanistan and what's this all about. And I think it's disappointing that 2 or 3 years into our major deployments in southern Afghanistan, we still haven't got that clear in people's minds. The fact of the matter is that the Taliban effectively is a front for Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is the expression of the militant Islamist agenda, which, if we don't oppose it and face it off in southern Afghanistan or in South Asia, then frankly that influence will grow. It could well grow, and this is an important point. We could see it moving through from South Asia to the Middle East to North Africa and to the high water mark of the Islamic Caliphate in the 14th, 15th century. Now, I don't mind if the people of southern Europe, of the Balkans, become Muslim by religious conviction or by democratic process. But what we don't want to see is the perversion of one of the world's great religions, Islam, by those who are politically motivated to use it for their own political purposes. That's what we've got to face down. And if we don't face it down in southern Afghanistan and South Asia, we'll have to do it closer to home. Much better to do it at arm's length. That's the reason why we've got to get this right. Let's get it right. Let's get it done in conjunction with the Americans, who've got much more clout than we have. And then we can do what we all want to do, is get our guys back.
Whether we accept that analysis of the situation or not, it sounds a huge task for a very, very overstretched British force to accomplish. As you say, we're a very small part of that operation. The Americans are the big part. Surely we could say to the Americans, and indeed it's argued that some Americans are saying to us, we can do without you.
Well, I don't think... I'd be interested to know what Americans are saying we can do without you. Who would voluntarily give up 10,000 members of a coalition force? I don't think that's right at all. I think our contribution is significant. Now, the fact is that we have now concentrated our UK military efforts in Afghanistan. We're out of Iraq, we've closed down most of our other operations, so we're concentrating on Afghanistan, which is why we can have 10,000 troops there. And they have been very successful. Bob Fox, in his report just after 7 o'clock, talked very briefly about Mustarak, the big operation in recent months in Helmand, as being successful. And he's absolutely right, it was. This whole process of clearing areas, holding them securely with enough boots on the ground, and then building a better life for the people, we can get it right. It's got to be rolled out across the south of Afghanistan, between the British Army, the American Army, and the US Marine Corps. It can be done. Stan McChrystal's got a good plan. Let's get our backs behind it. I think also one of the few points of unanimity that I picked up during the general election campaign was that all three major parties agreed that we had to get Afghanistan right, and probably we had to resource it right. Well, let's get behind that unanimity and make it work.
Well, that may be the case, but on the other hand, we've seen Nick Clegg, who himself was in Afghanistan not all that long ago, worrying publicly. He's written about it, about the role of British forces there, what they're doing, whether they're properly supported, whether their lives are being, as he put it, thrown away because our politicians won't get their act together.
Well, he's got the chance with David Cameron to be the politicians that are in charge now. And I think they understand that this is a really important issue. And it's no surprise at all, I think, that William Hague has gone to the United States this morning, and top of the agenda is Afghanistan. I mean, it's absolutely right that our government, the United States government, talks about these things, and we're all absolutely clear that A, this is important, B, it's got to be done well, and let's get on with it as quickly as we can, remembering that, of course, on the military side, the big key is to build up the Afghan national security forces so they can progressively take over security of their own country. After all, it is their country, not ours. We don't want to be there a moment longer than we have to be there.
But you know the argument as well as anybody else. Push them out of one bit of Afghanistan, they'll go to another. Push them out of Afghanistan, they'll go to Pakistan. Push them out of Pakistan, they'll go to Yemen. They will always be somewhere. They will always, if they choose, threaten us, be able to threaten us.
Well, that's a very negative assessment. I think
well, it may be negative, but the question is whether it's realistic.
Well, let me respond to that. I think as far as Afghanistan and Pakistan is concerned, there are an increasing number of security forces in Afghanistan that can progressively and in a much better way hold the areas that we've cleared. The Pakistanis on the other side of the Durand line now understand that the existential threat to them is not from their traditional foe, India, but from the enemy within, the Islamist threat themselves.
All right.
And we've got to face it down where we can find it.
In terms of the practicalities, we are going to have to save a great deal of money. Cut an awful lot of costs in this country. As we know, the armed forces are not ring-fenced in the way that the NHS is. The cuts, when they come, are going to have to come from boots on the ground, aren't they?
No, I think you're absolutely jumping to a very fast conclusion too rapidly. We've got to, very briefly, look at the character and nature of future conflict and decide what the threats to this country are. We've got to be quite clear about what our national ambition is. Then we can decide the capabilities and equipment programmes that our armed forces need. Bob Fox, in his reports, dismissed the ability to take savings out of the equipment programme. I don't agree with that at all. I think by anyone's recognition we've got too many tanks, too much heavy artillery, too many fast jets. The Navy needs to look very closely at what it needs to be. And I think particularly as far as fast jets are concerned, a number of contracts need to be looked at, one of which is the air-to-air refuelling contract, which was a shameful one, very, very expensive 2 years ago. A new government has got a chance to look a number of contractors in the face and say, hang on, things have changed, we're going to do differently. We can make a lot of savings on the equipment programme and still do what we need to do, John.
Maybe we've got to think really big and say, do we need the RAF?
I wouldn't say that. I think that's, to be honest, with all due respect to you and those that propose that, that's facile. We need 3 separate armed forces that work superbly together on joint operations.
General Sir Richard Dannatt, many thanks.
Thank you.